Good evening, everybody. We are going to get started in just another minute or two. Dr. Gallucci, do you want to?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank everyone who is joining us for this evening's very important new RHS community visioning meeting. I am going to go through some of the logistics before we get underway. I am going to start with those watching on YouTube. As we begin to approach question and answer time, you are welcome to put questions in the chat, and we will be verbalizing them on the Zoom. Your questions will then be answered by the presenters once you put them in the YouTube chat, which someone will be monitoring throughout the presentation. Now I'd like to thank, first of all, Ariana, Juan, and Danya, who are serving as our Portuguese, Spanish, and Arabic translators. And I want to give some instructions for those families who need translation. And I'm going to invite Ariana, Juan, and Danya to repeat those instructions just so everybody is set up and ready to go for our meeting. In the lower right-hand corner, in just a few minutes, you'll see kind of a globe that invites you to select a language. Click on that globe and then select the language that you need. You will see Portuguese for Portuguese, Spanish for Spanish, and unfortunately Zoom does not have Arabic listed, so we selected French. If you need Arabic translation, you should click French. Once you click on that language, you will hear this presentation in the language that you selected. If you have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the Q&A that's at the very bottom of the presentation. And now I'm going to pause here and invite Ariana to repeat those instructions for those that need translation.
Thank you, Richard. Olá, boa tarde, pessoal. Nós estamos muito felizes de estar apresentando esse projeto para vocês. E nós estaremos dando meu nome é Ariana Silva, vou estar passando a parte de português. E nós vamos dar algumas instruções aqui. Você vai poder escolher a sua língua. No lado direito, embaixo da tela, tem um globo que você pode clicar e escolher português, que está irendo para a sala de bate-papo, onde vou estar traduzindo a apresentação para o português. E no final, nós também teremos uma sala de bate-papo, onde você poderá fazer algumas perguntas. E nós vamos estar respondendo depois para você. Tá bom? Qualquer questão, qualquer pergunta você pode fazer para mim no final, tá bom? Muito obrigada. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Ariana. Now I'll invite Danya to repeat those instructions for those that need Arabic.
مساء الخير. إن أردتم الاستماع لهذا المنتدى باللغة العربية يرجى ضغط أيقونة الكرة الأرضية المتوفرة في أسفل الشاشة واختيار اللغة العربية، وسيتم بذلك نقلكم لسماع هذا بهذه اللغة. إن أردتم في النهاية طرح سؤال يمكنكم أيضا الضغط على أيقونة Q&A الأسئلة والإجابة في أسفل الشاشة، وسنقرأ هذا السؤال ونجيب عنه في اللغة العربية والإنجليزية. شكرا. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Danya. And now I'll invite Juan to give our presentation for those who need Spanish interpretation.
Thanks, Richard. Buenas tardes a todos. Estamos muy felices de estar acá con ustedes el día de hoy para presentar el proyecto de Revere. A continuación, en los próximos minutos, van a ver un icono en la esquina inferior derecha que les permitirá seleccionar la opción de traducción en español. Hagan clic en el icono para poder acceder a un cuarto virtual donde van a poner la oportunidad de escuchar la presentación en el idioma castellano. Eh, en la parte inferior de la pantalla también van a ver un icono de Q&A, de preguntas y respuestas, donde van a poder poner sus preguntas y al final de la sesión vamos a responder las preguntas que ustedes escriban en el idioma que ustedes seleccionen. Muchas gracias y estamos muy emocionados de estar con ustedes el día de hoy. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Juan, and thank you to all of our translators for providing this very crucial service for our community. At this time, Dr. Kelly is going to enable the translation. You're going to see that little globe down the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Please select your language, and we will get started in just a few seconds. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kelly to get us underway.
Thank you, Dr. Gallucci. I am going to remind everybody that we are speaking a little bit more slowly tonight than would be a typical cadence, just so that we have time for our translators to interpret everything that we're all saying. I want to welcome everyone here tonight. It's really important that we have community input into everything that we do, but in particular in a new project like the high school building project, in which we've been engaged for a little bit of time, but are really getting moving with the work now. It's more important than ever that we hear from students and parents and teachers and others about what they feel we need in a new Revere High School. And so I want to thank our partners here from Perkins Eastman, who are going to be leading our design process throughout the next probably 18 months or so, perhaps even longer than that, as we try to envision what our new school is going to look like. And I want to thank David Stephen from New Vista Design, who's here with us tonight and is going to lead this seminar and helping to bring out the voices of our parents and the students and the teachers and the community members who are present, either watching here in the Zoom webinar or on the school committee's YouTube channel. So without further ado, I should also mention that we will be having several additional community visioning sessions as we go forward and as we move further in the process. So this is the first of many. And we just want to thank everybody for being here and lending your voice to these important decisions that we'll be making. And now I'm going to pass it on to Bob Bell, who is going to introduce some of the work from Perkins Eastman.
Thank you, Diane. And thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to join the Revere community. Many of you may know, but may not know, that the city has partnered with the MSBA. That is the Mass School Building Authority. The City of Revere and Revere High School was selected after 3 years of submitting an application. And so it's a wonderful milestone. The Mass School Building Authority funds schools across the state. They've actually established a funding mechanism that takes 1 cent from the taxes that are earned throughout the state and applies it to school construction projects. They also have a well-established process, and we're going to take you through the process and some of the things that you can expect. So the Revere School Building Committee was one of the first steps in the process with the MSBA. This committee was formed to help steer and guide the process from the city's level. The Mass School Building Authority partners with communities and provides the funding, and they also provide a great deal of the requirements, regulations, and have outlined a robust process that is very inclusive. I'd like to ask or invite the members from the owner's project manager to wave, if people in the audience can see. One of the first steps within the MSBA process is to form or to engage an owner's project manager. They are partnered as well with the city and will help guide and bring professional experience to the project and to the process. I myself am a member of Perkins Eastman. Once the OPM joined the team, their first step is to then engage and solicit and hire ultimately an architect. Perkins Eastman is thrilled and proud to be part of such a dynamic and important part of Revere's future. I'm going to walk us through the phases. David, can you go back one slide? I think there's one in between. No, okay. I'm going to walk us through the phases. Let's go ahead 2 slides. I think there's an overall schedule that should be in there. There we go. So the overall process to construct a school project in the case of Revere is probably about 5 to 8 years. That really depends on whether it's new construction or it's a renovation, because renovations tend to take longer. But the first 3 years, which are shown in the schedule in the blue and yellow boxes, really represent the 3 years where the building and the project is designed and drawn and detailed sufficiently. So first 3 years are spent in design before it reaches construction. But what we're here to talk about is the immediate phase that we're engaged in. And that's the blue box that you see here. It's the first step, it's the feasibility and schematic. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. If you could go back one slide, David. So this is a look at the feasibility and schematic process. You can see that the feasibility study is broken into 2 major submissions to the MSBA. And then schematic design is the 3rd submission. What's really important here is that so many decisions are made very early on. You can see in the first phase, the phase that we're in right now, it's called the preliminary design program. And during this phase, we're developing everything from existing conditions to the goals and objectives, ultimately an educational program. And that'll include the educational space needs. We'll be developing plan options and also assessing them with the building committee and the community. And we'll be doing comparative cost estimates. All the way through these steps, this process, we'll be engaging you, the community, and also the faculty, students, and parents, as Diane had mentioned. The reason that we show this slide is that so much of the decision-making, so much of the work happens really within this first 1.5 months. So we're hoping that, and we're really glad that people are participating early, but we also hope to get the word out and to get more people participating so that when critical decisions are made, the community's voice has been a part of it and will be a part of it. In early July on this schedule, when we complete the preliminary design program, we will have developed the majority of options and also assessed them, and the school building committee will have selected the preferred several options. So there may be 3 or 4 options that are the best of the bunch, so to speak. The next phase, the preliminary schematic report, which will happen from July until October, is where then the one single final design solution is selected. So that's where really paints a picture in the future for Revere, and that's where the high school design solution will be selected. So it's important to get as much input as we can during this process. The last phase shown here, schematic design from October through May, is where we take that one design option and we develop it in sufficient detail to put a detailed cost to, and ultimately take it to vote with the city council in the city. If you could advance 2 slides, David. So the scope of the study that we're looking at, much of it is determined by the MSBA. They help the district establish the enrollment. In the case of Revere, we're seeing that there's a projected enrollment increase. They also provide the standards and guidelines that we need to follow. And these are really great benchmarks for good educational facilities. The state is investing their money and they want to make sure that it's a prudent, wise, and effective investment. So they set some of the standards on spaces and in the enrollment, but also some of the other guidelines. In the months that follow, you'll hear a lot about the MSBA reimbursement, and that's the percent they contribute. But it's important to note that there are some nuances to that. The MSBA contributes up to 80% of school funding, but it's of qualified scopes. So the effective rate, the real rate, will be less than the MSBA's rate for Revere overall. We talked about some of the scope options that we'll be looking at, and those include what it would take to repair the high school without even improving any educational spaces. That's a good test of what the cost just to fix the building would be. We will also look at a renovation that will include educational improvements, and that will also be a good way to gauge what it would take to keep the school, but to make it educationally appropriate. We'll also look at major additions to the existing school and new construction. New construction options, of course, could include the existing site, building somewhere around, in and around the building, but it'll also include alternative sites. Right now, we know we're just in the throes of determining what sites might be viable. We know the existing site is one. We've also seen that Wonderland is a possible site. There's a housing authority property. There's Caddy Farms, a property on Squire Road, Furlong Drive, and more to come. And we'd really love to hear if there are thoughts on these, but we've only just started to identify all the possible sites, and we'll evaluate them to make sure that we've turned over every stone. And with that, I think that provides a bit of background. We'll be sure to present this background as we go through each step of the process, and it'll become more familiar to most of you. David?
All right, thanks, Bob, and good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be here tonight and to be talking to you about the visioning process that that we have been involved in with a variety of stakeholders over the last few months in Revere. Now, I'm going to be speaking to you for about 1 hour. And again, I'm going to go at a pace where we can allow our translators to be comfortable translating. And also I'm going to build in some opportunities for you to interact with this slideshow that I'll be sharing through a program called Mentimeter. And I'm going to give you a site to log on to, and we'll be asking you for some of your opinions about things, and you can interact in real time with the slides. So we'll be able to get a sense of what people are thinking about. So first, I'm going to spend just about 5 minutes giving an overview of what the visioning process involves and what we've done thus far. We'll talk about the priority goal setting that has been done thus far, but also we'll check in with you about what your particular priorities are. educationally and architecturally, and in terms of the school as a community resource. We'd like to know what's most important to you. We'll be talking a bit about future-ready teaching and learning and how we think about designing schools that can function in traditional ways, because sometimes delivery is traditional, and that can also function in non-traditional ways. And we'll talk about what that means. But the basic thing that we know here is that this building will have to last for the next 50 years. And so we need to be able to think about a building that is flexible enough to evolve in ways that we can only make guesses at. But we certainly have a lot of ideas about how to design forward-thinking school buildings, and we'll be sharing that with you. And we'll be sharing what we call design patterns, or ideas about the design of future-ready learning environments. And in particular, we'll share the design patterns that have been prioritized by the visioning team, and give you an opportunity to also weigh in on your thoughts about them and what's most exciting to you. Now, as I said, I'll be speaking for about an hour, maybe a little bit less, and we'll be sure to leave in at least 30 minutes, probably more time at the end for Q&A. So people will be able to pose their specific questions. So as Bob pointed out, this whole process is in collaboration with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And because they are very interested in spending our tax money wisely and in helping communities to create schools that will last for a long time and be very thoughtful, they have really encouraged this visioning process in all new school projects, whether renovations or renovation additions or new buildings in Massachusetts that they are participating in the funding of. And this process is one that happens at the beginning of this feasibility phase, as Bob was pointing out, and it involves different stakeholder groups. We've been meeting with your educational leadership team from Revere Public Schools to frame the whole process and strategize about how to best customize it to meet the needs of Revere. We've been meeting with an educational working group or visioning team. And what's significant, I think, in terms of Revere is that you had a visioning team that was meeting before we came on board, and that had been meeting for the last year. So it was important for us to understand the work that had been done within that visioning group and to then move that forward. Now, that visioning group consists of community members, parents, students, teachers from the school, and administrators from both Revere High School and from Revere Public Schools. And that visioning team, as it existed last year, involved about 60 people. And this year, our visioning team has usually ranged from about 30 to 40 people that have been participating in a series of, up till now, 4 workshops, and we have our 5th workshop tomorrow. So the different subjects that we've been talking about, and I'm going to share information about each of these, and again, ask for your opinions about what's most important to you regarding each of them. We started out talking about educational vision and priorities in our first workshop, because that really is the foundation for all of the conversations then that follow. We want to make sure we very much understand what the district's agenda is, how they see learning as taking place both now and 10 years from now, how this opportunity can help them to move their agenda forward and better meet the needs of all the students and families in Revere. We then, from that educational vision, talked about design features and design patterns. And again, I'm going to share many of these with you. The team also created a set of guiding principles or big picture priorities for the design of the renovated or new building. We also spend time talking about issues of sustainability. We know that this will be a sustainable project. We need to talk about what that means for the community. We also talked about the issue of security, which is something we think a lot about when we're designing new schools. And we also talked about community partnerships, because one of the big opportunities that the district has been very clear about from the start is that as they design a renovated or new building for the high school, they wanted to be able to house some new programming around career pathways that are important, that they have been researching and looking into. And so we've been talking quite a bit about that. Now, this all connects to what we'll be talking about in tomorrow, which is our 5th workshop, which are key spaces and adjacencies. Now, the Mass School Building Authority has a very thoughtful template of spaces that it recommends that you put in your school based on how many students you have there. But how we connect those spaces together, the adjacencies between them, is how we build in a lot of flexibility. And so, we're going to be talking about that a bit too. Now, this all connects to something that the district will be creating, an education plan. This is a document that the district will write and submit along with the feasibility study to really articulate the district's vision educationally and how that connects to its ideas about what it would like for its new building. And finally, as Bob mentioned, we have community forums. This is the first community forum. There's another one, I believe, that's going to be happening on May 12th. And so, but this is the first of a series of community forums. We are also holding a faculty forum this coming Friday, which will involve all of the faculty from Revere. Now, a number of faculty members have been part of this visioning process, but this will enable us to connect with the larger faculty. Now, the Perkins Eastman team, in addition to this, will be spending a lot of time at the high school doing focus groups and talking to individual teachers and departments about what their needs are. So this education plan then is really a narrative about your educational and architectural priorities and desired adjacencies and how to best optimize the MSBA template of spaces. And so that is what the visioning process is really geared towards in terms of helping the district arrive at this narrative. We want to build upon, and we will be building upon, the work that the district has been doing to create their innovation agenda, to think about what kind of programming is most important to them. We'll be building off of the district's strategic plan and improvement plan and previous visioning teamwork. So before we even started all of these workshops, we looked at all the notes from the visioning that was done over the last year or more, and use that as a springboard from which to start.
David, can I clarify one piece?
Sure.
And that's just that the session on Friday is for the high school teachers specifically.
Yes.
You had mentioned for all Revere teachers, and I just didn't want,
Oh,
I know we have
sorry.
teachers
Yes.
from other schools listening, and I didn't want them
yes.
to get confused.
Sorry about that. Yes,
No
for the
worries.
high school teachers. Thank you, Diane. Thanks. So I'm going to ask you in just a minute, I'm going to share some priorities that have been established, and I'm going to ask you for what your priorities are. But I wanted to say beforehand that there are a bunch of things that we think about with any new or renovated school. And one thing that's important to understand too is that when we renovate a school, just as if you've ever been involved in a house renovation that's a gut renovation, where there are all new systems and walls and windows, that's what a renovation through the MSBA process generally involves. So any renovated or new MSBA building for Revere High School will have a bunch of things that, just as at a bare minimum, we know that it will be fully handicapped accessible. It will have elevators. All areas of the school will be accessible to students and teachers and families with differing physical abilities. We know that it will have heating and cooling that works. We definitely think now about schools as being used throughout the year, including the summer, and after hours and on weekends. So we're going to make sure that we have good heating and cooling systems. We know that we will be thinking about safe entry and security features. So it will be important to control who gets into the building and how, and make sure that that is closely monitored. We'll be thinking about active and passive security measures in the design process. We know that any new or renovated building will come along with new technology and furniture. And actually, furniture is a key piece of what makes a school more or less flexible. We want furniture that can be easily rearranged into a whole lot of different configurations. And we know that any new or renovated building will have good-sized classrooms, and all those classrooms will have windows. One thing that's different about the needs of classrooms now are that they often have more than one adult in them. It's not just one teacher with a group of students. And oftentimes, students are working on various things at once in small groups or independently. So we need our classrooms to be larger than they have been in the past. And we know that natural light is incredibly important as part of the education process. And finally, the building will have sustainable building features. It will either have a LEED rating or something called mass chips, but we will be looking at those sustainability features, and Heather will be talking a bit more about that in just a few minutes. So when we entered into this process of visioning, we explained to everybody that this is really an opportunity to think in aspirational ways. Definitely we'll have to make compromises along the way. That's always involved in the design process, and especially as we try to come in on budget. But this is the time to be really thinking in big picture and aspirational ways. We also want people to push their thinking forward about what is possible, because another thing that's quite different about the way we use schools now is that it's not just classrooms and then those big spaces like your gym and cafeteria and auditorium. It's all the spaces in between, because every square inch of the building can be fully wired, and we can, in very practical ways, make sure that we really use all of those spaces to the benefit of the school. And we'll be talking about that. So we want to envision a building that can meet your needs now, but also evolve over the coming decades. So with that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to share one page of highlights for 3 different sections of priorities that were determined by the visioning team. And then I'm going to open it up for people here in the audience to engage with a website and give us your ideas about priorities. And we're breaking the priorities into 3 different categories. We're going to start with educational priorities. Then we're going to move to architectural priorities. And then we're going to move to community priorities. And we know there's a lot of overlap in that, but it just helps us to cover all the bases. So when we think about educational priorities, it's really connected to the educational program within the school. What is it that is most important to the community of Revere as they think about the educational delivery and programming within the school? And so these are just a few of the things that were identified by the visioning team, some of the big picture themes that came up over and over again. Inclusivity, right up at the top. We know you have a very diverse student population, and the idea of everybody feeling included and having cultural sensitivity was very important. Connected to that is the idea of personalized programming, making sure that every student can be met where they're at and can be engaged in ways that they learn best and that will help to assist them in moving forward in their learning in very productive ways. And that can look different for different students. Hands-on and problem-based learning is another thing that people talked a lot about, wanting this new school building and program to support. And that's something that we see across the country and across the state of Massachusetts. Many, many schools are thinking about more hands-on and applied and problem and project-based learning, because that's the way that students can take the skills they're learning and put them into practice in authentic ways. It's very engaging for students. Studies show that that's how we all learn best, or most of us learn best. And it's a way to reach students that might otherwise not be feeling engaged in school. Now, connected to this is the idea of career pathways. And again, many schools are thinking about that. Now, some of those career pathways are specifically connected to a vocational program, but others are not. And so the idea is that we connect academics and the application of those academic skills into ideas about specific careers and pathways. Now, connected to that too is the idea of service learning and internships, allowing students the opportunity to connect with adult mentors in the community and to have the experience of workplace internships or service learning experiences. Also very important is enrichment. Now, this connects to the idea of whole child learning. In addition to our core academics, we also want to offer students experience in physical education, in music, in fine and performing arts, and in things like maker spaces or robotics or applied engineering. So those enrichment opportunities are very important. And finally, robust technology. Again, we don't know how the building will be evolving over time or the program will evolve over time, but we do know we need a robust technology infrastructure so that technology is there when you need it and where you need it. So with that, I'm going to then move on to this page, and this is where each of you will need to go to this website here, www.menti.com, and then type in this number code 49982720. Now, when you go to that website, either on your phone or on a different browser, on your laptop or desktop, you will come to this slide and you can input your ideas about your priorities. So what we're asking for now, remember, we're going to talk on the next slide about architectural priorities. Right now, we want to focus on educational priorities. What's most important to you when you think about the educational programming at Revere High School now and in the future? And so as people start responding, we should be able to see these come up on our screen. And you can respond as many times as you want. This is also completely anonymous in terms of, you know, who's sending things in. And if you would like to send in comments in your native language, that's fine for you to do that as well, and we will translate them as we consolidate the notes. So we're just going to take a few minutes to make sure everybody can get on this page. and then we're going to let the page populate. I'll do a little commenting as things come up on the screen. So again, we'd like to know what your top educational priorities for Revere High School are now and in the future.
And David, just one thing to mention, in case somebody loses the site or code, we put it in both chats on this Zoom and on the YouTube chat, so they can retrieve it as we go along.
Okay, great. Okay. So hands-on learning is definitely a theme. As I said, I work with schools all across the state and the country, and everybody's pretty much thinking about hands-on learning and collaborative learning. And part of the reason why is because many of the 21st century skills that we know are so important to student success really are sort of practiced through the process of doing these, and authentic learning experiences. Yeah, that's a lot about engaging students in things that feel meaningful to them. So hands-on learning, making sure kids are paying more attention to their education than on the internet. We know there are a lot of distractions for students. This school looks way older than City Hall in Boston. Okay, so having a new school that can look new. Whoops, sorry, I advanced there. Yeah, there we go. Fostering career interests and career readiness, financial education, and specifically for seniors. 21st century skills. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, and what that really means. More hands-on learning and technology, athletics, yeah, and technical skills training. Okay, that Revere High School goes back to grouping students by ability and not by age. Homogeneous teaching rather than heterogeneous teaching. Okay. Financial education. Again, having more college readiness and support, especially for students of color that are falling through the cracks. Okay, great. More hands-on skills, smaller classrooms, and career pathway programs, both vocational leading to certification and jobs, and also academic leading to college and careers, and combining them, integrating that vocational and academic piece. Kids need physical, athletic options as well as their academic options. Should be fair for all sports, not just the popular ones, okay. Maker spaces and opportunities for creative work. That's definitely in the MSBA template, and we've talked quite a bit about it with the group. Find someone that speaks your language. Being able to work with students and their different abilities. And a makerspace, also a social collaborative workspace for students, able to be separate from a quiet study space. Yep, more okay. And the most important is the quality of education for our students, and the tools, the educational tools that we can create for our students, and the professionalism of teachers, for sure. Exposure to many career paths, having more sports opportunities, good quality teachers, hiring teachers of color so students can identify, and that's something that actually has come up a number of times in the workshop, about ethnic diversity, shadowing programs, trained and well-prepared educators. A writing center needs to continue, peers tutoring programs. Social emotional learning, that comes up a lot as well. Learning how to be part of the community and fostering sort of an understanding that connects a lot to collaboration and communication. And again, teaching about finances. Great. Interaction skills for professional environments, which definitely if we do something like internship programs is a big part of that, and vocational education. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next category here, which is specifically thinking about the building itself and what the priorities are for the building. And so I'll share some of the priorities that came up so far. Many people talked about the idea of the school feeling welcoming, that it's a home base for students, that it's a space that students really want to be and they feel comfortable and safe there. Also, right up at the top of the list was the idea of safe community use and access. And we'll talk about that in a little bit when we talk about some of the design approaches. But we definitely, as I said, are thinking of schools now as community resources that are used throughout the year and throughout the week. And so after school hours and on weekends and throughout the summer, we want to make sure that the community can access parts of the building and that we can lock other parts of the building off so that that access happens in safe ways. Another big one is flexible and adaptable space. As I mentioned, this building will need to evolve over time. We want to make sure that we're creating spaces that can adapt to many different uses. Spaces for collaboration, and that's a big one as part of the skills that people think are very important, collaboration skills. So we need to provide classrooms that promote collaboration as well as spaces outside of the classroom. Hands-on learning and project spaces, also enrichment spaces like the spaces for performing and visual arts and athletics, indoor-outdoor connections. We think a lot now, and particularly this year, about learning being able to happen outside and being able to have safe outdoor connections. Handicapped accessibility, which we know is a given. Now there's an idea about universal design, which is really going beyond handicapped accessibility to make moving through a building, wayfinding through a building, not only physically possible, but easy to do. So we'll talk about that as well. Thermal comfort, very basic. Without it, it's hard to be in a school building if it's too hot or too cold. And that is way too often the case for our older schools. Safety and security, which again, we know is a given, and sustainability. So those are some of the architectural priorities that were highlighted. And I'm going to do the same thing. So we're on the same Menti.com page here. And let's have everybody weigh in about what your top architectural priorities are as you think about this opportunity for a renovated or new Revere High School facility. Yeah, so green space and outdoor classrooms, definitely something that we're thinking about, both formal and informal places for gathering. Gardens are a big part of that. Pretty much every school that we work with wants garden space at this point, green space. The idea of a welcoming center, sure, we're definitely going to be thinking about that community access core for the community, and that it feels welcoming and it's easy to find things. We also want it to feel welcoming to students and teachers. We definitely are thinking about having a heart of the school and having a central place where whole school community can be built. Flexibility and openness and ADA accessibility, definitely thinking about that. Bold, modern design, bright and transparent. We're going to be thinking about lots of natural light and lots of internal transparency that allows for borrowed light within the interior of the building. Large windows, emergency ground floor. We'll definitely be thinking about lockdown procedures and areas of refuge within the building. Meditation and prayer room. We definitely will be thinking about quiet places to get quiet. That's a big theme, not only collaboration spaces, but spaces where people can get quiet. And that could be definitely something that connects to the idea of meditation and prayer. Okay, someone with a question, why didn't we build this new school in the field next to the middle school, interconnecting them and drop the old high school and place the park where the school is at? Better and welcoming. Well, we are going to be looking at different sites as we go through this process. A combination of adaptable spaces and specialized spaces when necessary. Sure, you don't want to just have every space multifunctional. Sometimes you need more specific bells and whistles for spaces. Athletics for both genders. Again, a welcoming center, financial education, real estate, and stocks. Greenery inside and outside the building. Yeah, we definitely might consider green roofs or the idea of biophilia, having green within the school. Internships, okay, so connecting to programming again. Appropriate security protocols that allows off-hour access. Yeah, that's a big concern as we think about really creating community access. We know we have to do that in very safe ways. A state-of-the-art security system for active shooting and bulletproof doors and windows. We'll definitely be looking at both active and passive measures for security, and technology and modernized library and computer lab, okay? Having parents be more involved. Well, and that connects to program, but it also could connect to the building in terms of a welcoming place for parents or a place for the parent organization. Bike storage to incentivize bike riding. Definitely, we'll think about that. Room for music program. There's definitely going to be space allotted to music programming. Bigger and better medical area and nurse's office, that will also be part of the picture. All right. We have one more category here of priorities, and then we're going to jump into talking about some design ideas. But now community priorities connect to the idea of community use. And so those are being able to promote community access and connection, seeing the school as a community resource, having adult learning spaces that are accessible after hours, providing parent and family resources within the building, and also connected to community that came up a number of times is the idea of communication and inclusion. So having this process be very transparent as we go through its various phases, but also just communication with families and members of the community and a sense of inclusion within the building. And so this is our last slide for this section. So if we could have your thoughts about what your top community priorities are for the school. Okay, so classes for parents. We'll definitely be thinking about how to make some of the classrooms as well as some of the sort of project spaces, things like a maker space or an engineering lab, things like that, how to make them accessible as a community resource. after school and weekend programs open to students and community members. Great. Safe, secure off-hour access, definitely. Adult education. Maintaining the existing community garden. Okay. Yeah, being open after school hours. We'll just wait another minute or so, see if any others come in. Okay, so access to access to parents in their preferred language with professional trained interpreters. Okay, a hub for all community members, spaces for community partnerships. Okay. Okay, one gymnasium with only one basketball court is not adequate for 2,000 plus students. So looking at a larger gymnasium. Flexible access for teachers beyond typical school hours. Okay. And classes for adults to learn English as a second language. All right. Teach giving back to the community by increasing beautification events and classes. All right. So I'm going to move on now. What I wanted to let you know is that this conversation is ongoing. And we want to make sure that if you have ideas after this presentation, that you know where to send them to, and that you also know where to find information about the project. So if you go to the Revere Public Schools website, and then you go to the link to the building project, the school construction project, it will bring you to this page. And then you're going to see a documents page, and in that documents page, or in the project team page, sorry, there's going to be a designer link, and in that you're going to find all the notes from our various workshops. We'll have them compiled by the end of next week, and be posting them on the website. So that's for ongoing information about the project, that's where to look. And also, and I'm going to post this in the chat, this is a link. If you have additional thoughts and ideas for the design team, there's a link that you can go to and provide more thoughts. If you have more thoughts about your educational, architectural, or community priorities, you can send them to this link, and we'll make sure to include them in the set of recommendations from the community. And I'll post that link a little bit later in the show. And so now I just want to talk a little bit about learning goals. We spent the first workshop really thinking about what's special about Revere High School, what's working really well there, and also what the challenges are and what's most important to people. And we did an activity in small groups and then compared notes and came up with a collective list of the learning goals that were most important to this group of participants, which included, again, administrators, teachers, students, parents, and community partners. And we had quite a few students involved in the workshops, which was great. They offered some really great perspective. I'm just going to quickly talk about these learning goals that were highlighted. The most important one, or the one that people felt should go at the center of everything, is this idea of self-discovery and expression. That really connects with students experiencing joy in the learning process, finding their own voice, developing a sense of personal direction through personal learning plans, and developing more mindfulness and awareness. Now, that's at the center, and then these other learning goals or skills were also highly prioritized. And these are the categories. The first one, and all of them are equally important. But as we start here at this part of the circle, self-direction and ownership, students taking an active role in their own learning and taking initiative, being entrepreneurial, developing the ability to adapt and be resilient. And that connected to also developing interests in career paths and work-based learning. Now here, next skill is critical and creative thinking. And critical thinking is at the top of pretty much any list of 21st century skills. We need to help students learn to become good problem solvers and lifelong learners. And as part of that, we want them to be able to think inventively, and something called growth mindset, which allows students to develop the awareness that the harder they work at something, even if it's frustrating, that they will make progress and grow and learn. Next on the list is social emotional learning, and that was mentioned previously as important in our educational priorities. Connected to this is being emotionally intelligent, self-aware, ethical and empathic in your thinking, being able to take other people's perspectives and understand where they're coming from. Moving along, communication and collaboration were prioritized, and that is effective written and verbal and graphic communication, but also being able to listen actively and to show leadership and manage conflict. And finally, but certainly not least important, is cultural awareness and inclusion. The idea of equity and access, students developing multicultural and global literacy, and celebrating the diversity that is Revere High School. Now, people talked about an active focus on anti-racism and the development of empathy, humility, and good citizenship. So these are the learning goals that were in our first workshop prioritized. And then in the second workshop, we took another pass at them and created this final version. So I wanted to actually put out a question here for folks, for you to offer your thoughts about what learning goals and skills do you think are most important for Revere High School students as you think about your student or the community at large. So that's at the same Menti link, same number. We'll just open this up for a few minutes for people to share their thoughts about important skills. Yeah, so the ability to be able to work with other people, to collaborate, it connects to a lot of the sort of cultural also sensitivities that were mentioned just before, and that cultural awareness and inclusion, communication. Okay, analysis and critical thinking. Students getting along and learning the culture of other friends in the school, so they're aware of that culture, and especially teachers also developing that awareness. Social emotional learning, communication and collaboration and leadership, all connected. Building good study habits and resilience. Yep. The ability to communicate with teachers. Social, financial, and multicultural teachings, great. Critical thinking and communication, self-regulation and ownership of learning, life lessons, lifelong learning, and life skills. Taking ownership of their shortfalls, yeah, being able to see where your challenges are and address them. Great. So this connects a lot to, I think, the skills that I think everybody's on the same page about that. Now, I'll just go back and I'll say about this set of skills that as educators, and I'm both an architect and an educator, but mostly I've spent time in schools. As educators, we know that all of this is in service, or much of it is in service to the mastery of academic content and learning your core academics. But these are the higher order thinking skills that allow people to go beyond just learning those rote or memorization skills, and to be able to apply the learning they're doing in ways that allow them to become good thinkers and more self-directed learners. I'm going to switch now to just share with you quickly the guiding principles that were created at our last workshop. And these are guiding principles for the design of the building. And there are big picture priorities that we will keep coming back to as we're designing the building to make sure that we're meeting these goals. Now, these are called Guiding Principles 1.0 because we're going to do a version 2.0 tomorrow when we meet again. People will look at this first version and think about how do we want to develop it further. But the big themes that came up connect both to educational and architectural priorities. Learning by thinking and doing, all of that, the talk about these 21st century skills, career pathways, and connecting to real world authentic applications are really connected in the group's mind to the idea of learning by thinking and doing. So you're applying your learning in ways that are meaningful. Collaboration and connection, about fostering relationships. One of the things that has come up a lot is the idea of small school academies or pathways, or ways that a 2,000 student school, kids can connect to the larger school, but they also connect to the smaller places within the school, smaller communities within it. And this also connects to the idea of connecting across disciplines and to the idea of students feeling a sense of being a good citizen within the school. Equity, access, and opportunity, and that's being able to personalize, connect, and own your experience for every student. Also came up as a guiding principle. Flexibility and adaptability, and this is more about the building, but a building that will evolve for the future and have seamless technology. School as a community resource, which we've mentioned a bunch, a safe community access and being a welcoming and inviting, promoting community connections, and being a sustainable and responsible building and connected to that outdoor spaces and connectivity. So again, we'll be working on this tomorrow in our 5th and final workshop with the visioning team to take this forward. And now I'm going to hand over to Heather for just a minute to say a few words about the sustainability focus.
Great, thank you. So as part of the visioning sessions, as David was mentioning, we spent a chunk of time talking about sustainability more specifically. So because of the project, the MSBA requirements, sustainability will be a natural component of that we will focus on for Revere. But we wanted to open up the conversation to make sure that we're looking at sustainability holistically before we get into specifics of different sustainable certifications that might be pursued for this project. So when we talk about sustainability holistically, we mean looking at sustainability not only in terms of environment, but also in terms of social sustainability and economic sustainability. And these three coming together to create a truly sustainable project. So we went through an exercise where we actually looked at different measures of sustainability, which you see listed here on the left, 10 different measures, and ranked and prioritized them as a group. Coming out on top, I'll just highlight very quickly what was brought to the top of the list here. So well-being was the #1 priority across the board. This is not surprising, considering current times that we're in, but also even before that, there's a big priority on outdoor connection and access, natural light and air, things that you have already brought up here today. And that will obviously be a continued focus specifically for us moving forward. The second priority was focusing on equity amongst the community and how the design can impact equity. The third priority was energy, and in particular, considering the possibility of looking at net zero energy for this project, reducing reliance on gas, and taking advantage of passive design strategies to get there. These are all things we can continue to look at and study moving forward. And then finally, integration and change were the last two kind of prioritized amongst this top 5 here. Integration really relates deeply to things that were mentioned earlier, celebrating our community history, diversity, and using the building to help with that celebration. And then finally, change relates to variety of changes and creating a building that's flexible and adaptable to those changes, whether it's demographic changes, changes in technology, climate change, upcoming natural disasters that we can plan for. Those were the topics of focus.
Okay, thanks, Heather. So before we get to our Q&A section, I'm going to take the next 20 minutes to go through the top design patterns that were prioritized in the visioning process so far. And now you're going to see in the bottom right-hand corner of every slide, you have the option on Mentimeter to press a heart if you love this idea, to press a thumbs up if you think it's a great idea, press a thumbs down if you're not so crazy about it, and press a question mark if you need to find out more information about it. So if you would like, I'm going to share 15 design patterns. At the very end, you're going to have the opportunity to rate them, the things that are most important to you. But also along the way, you can give us feedback. Like we can see a bunch of people pressing on the heart right now. They're liking this pattern. The first one is having a heart of the school, and the idea that there's a central learning commons, a place that brings the whole community together. And in this particular example, and this is a school in Massachusetts through the MSBA process, built through the MSBA process 5 years ago, the West Bridgewater Middle High School. And you can see that their cafeteria is their heart of school, but it's also got a very nice carpeted stair area where kids can sit and use their technology. It's also a nice performance area. And it connects to an interior courtyard that also has places to eat and also outdoor classrooms. So it really is, it's the cafeteria, but it's used throughout the day as sort of the heart of the school. The next pattern is one of community access. And here you can see that this is also at West Bridgewater. This is a plan looking at the building, and you can see that the gym, the cafeteria, and the interior courtyard, the auditorium, the music area, the video lab, and the robotics and computer area are all accessible in this community core. So it's safe and it's welcoming. It can be used after hours safely. You can lock off the rest of the areas of the school from this area. So it really becomes a community center where those key spaces are accessible. And actually, this is a space that is that space that we just saw. It's a very pleasant space, and the school rents it out sometimes to organizations as well. They make it accessible to the community, and they also use it as an income generator. This pattern is one of welcoming arrival. The idea that that you want a good first impression, that the entry should be secure and people should know that it's secure. So there's very good kind of visual access to who's coming and going in the building, and you're buzzing them in or not. But also that there's a sense of welcome and pride as you come in. And it's also easy to find where the main entry is, because oftentimes with schools, it's not so easy to find that. And then this pattern is one of classroom neighborhoods or clusters of learning. And what this talks about is, you can see in this diagram that there is, instead of a classroom here, this is an open space that's open to the hallway, and that all of the other classrooms around it can kind of relate to. There's also a teacher planning area here and special education rooms that are integrated fully into this neighborhood. So this could, and here are some bathrooms as well. So students don't need to travel far to go find a bathroom. Now this could be a 9th grade neighborhood. It could be an English neighborhood or a math neighborhood, or it could be integrated across subject areas. So this is one of the ways that we're looking at building on the connections between spaces. This could support a career pathway as well. And one important element of that is that there's some visual connection to this space. So this is a space that students can leave the classroom, they can do independent or small group work, or you might gather a couple of classrooms out there for a presentation or an activity. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. Now the classroom itself is still very important. And we talked before about classrooms needing to be flexible, and they need to have flexible furniture, good natural light. In this classroom, you can see that you can pull the electrical down from the ceiling. So as you move these tables around, you can have different configurations. You can adapt this to more traditional delivery or small group work. These plastic chairs can be stacked. You can move things around. Actually, some of these tabletops can go up and down, so you can have standing tables as well. There's good technology infrastructure, so students can be using their laptops. And we want to have good storage as well in the classrooms. And you notice here that there's no carpet in the classroom, because oftentimes we're thinking about, especially if we're going to do projects in a classroom, we need to have it easy to clean. Enrichment spaces. Now we know that we're going to have these spaces in the building, and there'll be a good amount of square footage directed at them. But we want them also to be easy to access, visible, and centrally located. So that also connects to their ability to be used after hours by the community, things like a fitness center or gym, things like your music area or your art classrooms. We want to be able to support extracurricular activities, enrichment programming, after school programming, adult programming, and have those easy to find. And also we want them visually accessible, because that's where some of the really interesting and fun stuff is happening in the school. And we want to make sure that we can showcase that. Multi-use and flexible spaces. So here's a space that might otherwise be a hallway, but it's expanded, and students can use their technology. They can work independently or in small groups, but it's right next to a classroom, and it's visually accessible to that classroom. So you can send students out here and still monitor. And you can see here's a meeting room here, a breakout room that you can close the door. So, so having a collection of these flexible extended learning spaces and breakout rooms and collaborative spaces, this also could be a space where performance could happen. You could rearrange that furniture and have some kind of presentation or performance take place. Labs and technical spaces and maker spaces. And these are all in the template of spaces that will be provided to the school. The MSBA wants to make sure that science spaces are very flexible. So you can see in this picture from Essex Tech that the science tables are on wheels. They can be moved around. All of the gas and air and water are around the perimeter of the classroom here, so you can really easily open it up. And we also want to be thinking about things like a maker space where science, technology, engineering, and math or project work can happen. We also want to be thinking about project labs that connect to career tech spaces, places where kids can be creative and where there's good storage and again, good surfaces that you can spread your stuff out onto and move around. Learning Commons as hub is another one of the design patterns that was prioritized. So just like the cafeteria or the gym, we want to make sure that the Learning Commons or the Library Media Center is centrally located, and that it has the ability for students to collaborate as well as to do quiet work. So it has more active and more quiet areas as well. And the technology is really easy to use, and it serves as one of the community and intellectual hubs of the school. We want to make it as flexible as possible. Quiet and breakout spaces. We talk a lot about collaboration, but we also know that students and adults need places to focus and get quiet. So we want to think about small group spaces that might be a breakout room that you can close a door. It might be an alcove in a classroom where you can sit and read. It might be a nook in the hallway with a whiteboard wall and a flat screen monitor where you can do work, small group work, but it's visually accessible to the classrooms. Or it might be just pulling up your computer under a stairway. And this really connects to the idea of anywhere, anytime learning, that in a fully wired building, learning can take place anywhere. And actually, in terms of the pandemic and social distancing, schools that have these variety of spaces where you can spread out from beyond the classroom, and students that know how to navigate these type of spaces and work independently, all fared much better in this pandemic. Varied performance venues. We know that performance and the arts is really important to the school. We want to be thinking, in addition to an auditorium, about other places where performance can happen. Here's an example of a cafeteria that has a stage platform and some lighting on it. So it's really a multi-purpose gathering space that can be used, and you can see lots of different applications for this as well. And we want to make sure that this is accessible to the community. And we just have a few more here. Outdoor learning, the idea of outdoor gathering spaces, outdoor learning spaces. Here at Essex Tech, they use the site, which has a lot of great natural sort of beauty that is connected to science classrooms. So depending on the site of the school, we want to maximize the use of the outdoors and connect to the ecosystem that you are in at Revere Beach. We want to provide places for students to gather and feel connection to nature and cross easily between indoor and outdoor. And sustainability, which Heather spoke about, and again, which is going to be a big focus. One of the things, in addition to fostering well-being with good light and ventilation and comfortable systems, comfortable temperature, we want to be thinking about reduced energy consumption, so passive and active measures in building design that promote that, as well as making those visible within the design so that the building itself becomes a teaching tool and students can interact with the systems in the building as part of the curriculum. And also be aware of being good stewards of the environment. Two more, distributed dining. The idea here is that in addition to maybe a main cafeteria, we might have other areas in the school where students can eat and have a smaller dining experience that isn't quite as noisy or chaotic. And we know that these dining spaces are also places where community is built, and they also serve as good collaboration spaces. So here at Essex Technical School, you can see, which is also an MSBA job, this is one of 2 distributed dining areas in addition to the cafeteria. Now there's a distributed servery, and there's also an area where it creates a center for one of the smaller learning communities within the building. And lastly, we talked quite a bit about the idea of branding and identity, and using this renovated or new building as an opportunity to rebrand the school and to connect to the history, certainly, of Revere, but also to create within, using color and materials or graphics or public art projects or display and exhibition to create different areas within the building that really speak to the community and culture of Revere, that tell stories about the community, and that have different identities in different fields. And you can see here, just by in this particular building, which is a high school with 3 small learning communities within it, each of those communities has a different color and material scheme so that you feel connected to the whole, but you also feel like there are some different identities of each of those communities. So I have one more slide here, which is just to give you an opportunity to think about out of the design patterns that we just shared, to choose perhaps the top 5 that are most important to you. You can rank more than 5 if you want, but we'll just leave this open for a few minutes and see. Again, going to menti.com, you'll come up with a screen and you can choose the ones that you want to rate. And we'll see a little graph appear here and see what people are most excited about. Now, I should say that I just shared with you 15 design patterns. We shared initially 36 design patterns with the visioning team, and these were the ones that really got selected as being of highest priority. There's a lot of overlap between different design patterns, but it just gives the design team a much better sense of what some of the most important design approaches are as they start to think about conceptually putting together conceptual designs for the school. We'll wait just one more minute or two to see if more people want to join in. It looks like Heart of School is right up there at the top, along with community access and multi-use and flexible spaces. Now, we will be thinking about all of these patterns. All of them are important as we think about what goes into a multi-use and flexible school building. So Heart of School, community access and welcoming arrival, all up at the top. Outdoor learning, multi-use and flexible spaces, and sustainability. All right. Now I'm gonna open up here. Also, are there other design patterns and features that you would like to add to the list that you didn't see here? If there are other elements of design approaches that you think are really important, you can add them here. All right, well, I don't see any comments coming up. I'll give it another 30 seconds or so. And then I think Bob is going to share with you next steps, and then we will open up for Q&A. A water feature, yes. Something that reminds us that we're near the beach. Certainly possible. Revere Pride, okay, we got a bunch coming in here. A pool for swimming classes. Now, I hate to disappoint, but the MSBA will not support a pool or participate in funding a school that has a pool. So that's unfortunately not an option in terms of their approach. But diversity and equality, water collection systems, maybe already under sustainability, rainwater collection, sure, more open and green spaces, aquarium. Definitely the theme of being by the water and being in the ecosystem that you're in, I think is something that we can certainly think about how that translates into color and texture and features of the building. Okay, so all right, someone's loving the new design, hopefully having a new look. Put an electric stairway from the lunchroom to the classroom. That's a good blue sky idea. All right. Good. Seems like we covered a lot of stuff, and good to have these suggestions. Bob, I'm going to turn over to you for your last sort of next steps and milestone slide, and then we'll open up for Q&A.
Great. Thank you, David. So this is just a look ahead. Clearly, we're approaching the end of April. So the visioning is wrapping up. It's really all coming together. This community meeting tonight is a big part of it. As mentioned, we have at the end of the month, actually this Friday, a full faculty forum for the high school. And as we proceed into May, we'll be working on the space summary. And that's where a lot of the visioning and the goals here will come together into a list of the spaces and things that we need to build into the new school. And with that information, we'll start planning options. So we've already been looking at opportunities for sites and trying to understand if a building would even fit on them. But the next step is really a lot of fun, because you'll see some of the goals and things we've talked about here start to take shape in the form of plans. As we proceed through May, we're also going to be reaching out to business and community partners. We know the school is very much connected and tethered to a number of partners, and having partnerships now with colleges and businesses. But we also want to, what we've been hearing is to try to expand those relationships and opportunities for students. So we're going to have a reach out round of groups that are coming up. Continuing into May, we hope to have the next community meeting, May 12th. That's just 2 weeks away. And at that meeting, hopefully we can share some of the site analysis and other things that have been going on. May 21st, we have faculty focus groups. So this is a chance for us to talk with teacher groups into more detail about the needs and goals that they have. Moving into June, the early part of June, we're going to see a lot of the options coming together. There'll be an assessment evaluating those options. That actually starts now, but it'll really beginning closer to selecting the handful of good options, good sites that'll move forward. At that time, we'll also have costs developing. So look for that in early June. And June 10th, I think we've said is a tentative date. We haven't worked this out yet, but we're trying to target that date for community meeting 3. And that'll be a chance to respond and talk about some of the preferred options. And then finally, it gets into mid-June, where we'll have school committee approval of the educational program, the submission to the MSBA, and then we'll proceed into the next phase, which would be to take the handful of preferred options and start to detail them a bit more, develop them a bit more, and ultimately end up with a preferred solution that occurs in late October. So please stay tuned. Please tell folks, friends, neighbors, others in your community to look at the website, get engaged. It's a pretty good showing tonight, and we're hoping we can build on that.
Great, thanks, Bob. And now we're going to open up for Q&A questions. And Richard, how are we going to be? How are we going to be fielding these questions?
Yeah, so we can verbalize them. We only have one thus far. On the YouTube channel, someone had asked about if we had any thoughts for what green spaces would look like, or potentially garden roofs.
Bob, you want to take a hand at that, or?
Absolutely. So I'll repeat, the question is about any thoughts on green spaces or garden roofs. Absolutely. I think one of the things that we're hearing and seeing throughout the goals and the vision are to connect to the landscape, to really think about wherever the school ends up, to really think of it as a whole campus solution. And we know that schools and the environment around a school can be a real learning lab. It can be interactive. It can be a teaching tool. So we're excited to take some of the sustainability things that Heather's talked about, some of the regional and very specific ecological, environmental conditions that are in Revere, and kind of help make them part of the landscape, part of the teaching tool, and part of the opportunities for students. There's a lot more to come. We certainly would love to hear ideas and details.
There is a second question on the YouTube channel asking, as a parent, how do I stay informed and participate in future presentations? And I would say to continue to watch for notices from the school department. We will email and make phone calls home each time we're hosting one of the community events. And as David mentioned earlier, all of the notes will be posted on the website in short order. And anybody who wants to can also reach out to Dr. Perella if they wanted to join one of the teams or be more involved than participating in the webinars.
Yeah, and Diane, there was, so I'm seeing, I was going to post in the chat section a link, the link that Dr. Perella had provided, but I see that that's only available to panelists, or is there, what's the best way to get that?
Oh, you're right. I think perhaps the best way for us to share that link is for us to work with Linda and the Left Field team to actually put the link on the website.
Okay.
And that way folks can access that and provide feedback on an ongoing basis. So we can work with Brian Dakin and Linda Laporta and the rest of the Left Field team tomorrow to iron that out.
Okay.
I'm also available by email at any time. So if anyone would like to add any thoughts or questions, you can email me directly.
We had a question in the YouTube, and thank you for all these questions, by the way. As we see an increase on bike lines and efforts to reduce carbon emissions, are bike storages being considered as part of the school?
So the question, I'm not sure if the question was interpreted, so I'll repeat it. There's an interest in seeing a lot more of an approach to provide bike lanes and reduce carbon emissions, and wondering if bike storage and those kinds of accommodations are being considered.
Yes, that's correct.
I will say absolutely. It's one of the things that's certainly built into a sustainable approach. But we also know from what we've seen in Revere that it's a very walkable location now. Students take advantage of that, and we hope to not only encourage that, but to build on it, to create a school that's not just accessible in those ways. And certainly we have limits to what we can do. We will only have our site to work with, but we want to connect more broadly to the city in a larger strategy. In fact, everything about the school we feel needs to be part of a full community solution and is connected in some way. So bikes are a great example. I fully expect that we'll have major accommodations, including sheltered bike storage as well.
There's another question about, it says, I joined late. Is the new high school going to be moving to Wonderland, or is RHS being renovated? And the quick answer to that is we don't know yet. We actually have 7 different sites that we are looking at right now through the feasibility process. And one of the things that we'll be doing through this process as we consider design is thinking about which of those sites is appropriate and what the correct path is to proceed. Hopefully we'll know that by the end of this summer. Bob, do I have that timeline right?
Yes.
And I don't see any additional questions. Dr. Gallucci, do you see any more? No.
Nope.
So I'll just close by saying, as we've already mentioned, there will be additional opportunities going forward for the community to engage with us. I want to thank everybody, especially David Stephen, who led us through all of this, Heather, who definitely helped us with a lot of information, and Robert Bell, who helped us with a lot of information. I want to thank our translators who have been instrumental in making sure we could help everybody engage in this process. And so thank you. And I'll just ask Bob and David if they have any, and Heather, if they have anything they want to add.
I would just say thank you for taking the time to listen, and we definitely want to continue to hear people's feedback. And there will be other opportunities in the upcoming community meetings to share more information and field your questions.
I'll just say, spread the word, get your friends, neighbors, other people to participate, please.
And your children, bring your kids. We want to hear their voices as well. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.